The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. 5th Book. Epilogue, or Prologue. Chapter 17. It is very little what is missing to add to this epilogue, or prologue. Once past the shock that undoubtedly the departure of Uncle Kurt produced to me, evidenced in the abnormal serenity with which I was reflecting about the symbols of the sword, ducks, fowls and beasts, and surpassed the painful effect of the hit on the head, I started to take consciousness of the reality, and my nervous system entered in violent crisis. I felt that I was crumbling inside. I tried to maintain myself armed from outside, screaming 1,000 insults and oaths against all our foes. BELICENA VILLCA, her son Noyo, the Captain Kiev, the loyal Siders, the Führer, and even the unknowable, resulted included by my irreproducible blasphemies. I'll not justify myself, because the known events explain this irrational action. How they would not break my will, if in the term of 4 days, my family was outrageously murdered, or my family, the close and far relatives, and the only survivor a part of me, was Uncle Kurt, had just left to never return. I went mad. I uttered insults, and kicked with impotence the corpses of the ancient killers. With irrational aggressiveness, I was just to clear out on those diabolic corpses the charges of the useless pistol machine, when some wind was coming from the interior, brought me providentially to the reality. I was not alone. I remembered all of a sudden that during the attack we had heard some screams of sorrow. With the countenance still decomposed by the fury, some demental brightness in the eyes, and with the guns in my hand, I entered decidedly in the house, causing the consequent alarm of the person who was handcuffed over the table of the dinner room. He was Segundo, the Indian descendant of the people of the moon, that BELICENA VILLCA mentioned in her letter, and to whom I saw some 2 times as visitor of the neuropsychiatric hospital of Salta. He looked awful, because Barayan Bishar had booted his nails from the hands and feet. However, he had to be grateful to the gods, and to the boomerang operation, because the demons lacked of time to cut his tongue and ears, and clear out his eyes, and finally, flay or behead him. When I untied him, I asked him if there was a medical kit. The Indian recovered the speech. "And the 2 men?" he asked with caution. "They were not men," I replied in bad manner, "but the demons Barayan Bishar. Both are dead, outside. We killed them with the shots that you heard. And now, my uncle is chasing him, until the bottom of the central abyss of the universe, until an infernal place, from which they may never come back." Now, I understand that such answer was unbecoming and absurd, as to offer it to an unknown Indian, who possibly would not even have the minor idea of what I was saying. But I suffered the effects of the shock and the crisis, and I didn't stop to think in what I was saying. Rather, I accursed me permanently for all my mistakes, for being the cause that the demons would have discovered the world and the domicile where my family lived. Because in the planned attack, I forgot to consider the compassionate action of XVII, and for ignoring the bad feeling that produced me the farewell of Uncle Kurt in Cirillos, before flying with the dogs Davis. Uncle Kurt knew what was going to happen, that we were going to be proved by the maternal passion of Avalokiteshvara, who would defend the immortals mercifully, and that with all possibility, should leave in persecution of the demons, to maintain his fear awakened. And for that reason, he wished to bid farewell before entering in operations. And I was the imbecile who followed with the plan till the end, without stopping anything, underestimating the capacity of Uncle Kurt. Now, I was alone, more alone of what Uncle Kurt was in his exile, although he affirmed the opposite, to console me and give me courage. Such were the thoughts that occupied my mind, when I replied to the Indian of the referred manner. Fortunately, I was not completely alone. The Indian repeated, with even more caution, "Barrage and Burcharge." It is possible that just in this moment, I realized that the Indian was real. "Barrage," I repeated, trying to remember where I had heard before that pronunciation. Then, I remembered the letter of BELICENA VILLCA, and the story of the people of the moon. It is true that you know them too. Those sons of the bitch exterminated your family, just as the house of Farsis, and my own lineage. I exclaimed with exaggerated euphoria. And how do you know it? The Indian interrogated in the top of the amazement. You are not from army. Ha, ha, ha. I laughed with desire at discovering the impression that the command uniform caused. No, man, no. I do not belong to the army. Who was member of the army was Noyo VILLCA, as you know it well. Is that, you don't remember me? I am XVII, the psychiatrist that attended BELICENA VILLCA in Salta. She told me everything in an extensive letter. For example, I know that you descend from the people of the moon, who lived Ilcoati, in the late Titicaca, and that your remote ancestors resided in Scandinavia, in the country of King Coleman, from the lineage of XVII. Oh, the medic. Yes, I remember you. I was aware that MS. BELICENA would write a letter with information about the house of Farsis, but I ignored who would be the receiver. And you say, he added, that those torturers are the same Barrage and Burchard, who guided Malones of Dieguid Hebrew Indians, at the command of the Kekikeri, in the invasion to the island of the sun. They were, I corrected him, indeed, were the same, although, they maybe employed other bodies. I don't know that with exactitude. But what is true is that, 3 months ago, they murdered BELICENA VILLCA, in the hospital, and in just 4 days, that they ended with all my family. By these damned demons, we just remained 3 survivors of 3 spiritual lineages. Noyo VILLCA, from the house of Farsis. Segundo, from the house of XVII. And XVII, from the house von Subayman. BELICENA VILLCA requests me in her letter to search for her Noyo VILLCA, in Cordoba, and she assures me that, you'll help me. Moreover, she recommends me to be very careful with Beret and Bishwa, who are powerful demons. But you see, even for the hits that they gave us, and thanks to the help of the gods, we could end with them for the moment. There will be another demons that will chase us undoubtedly, and 1,000 unknown dangers, but it is little probable that Beret and Bishwa return to the world of the blood of Farsis. In the other worlds of illusion, nevertheless, they will continue existing. And woe of those spiritual men that don't find soon the world of the house of Farsis. What do you think, Segundo? Will you help me? Of course I will. No, Dr. Sentinel, that she was for those of my race, a queen. Her desires are orders for me. She asked me to not go to hospital of Salta again, because she was watched and suspected that she was going to be killed, and I fulfilled her orders to the letter. I never went to Salta again, and I not responded to correspondence of the hospital, of the judge, of the police, etc. And no one came here, because this house is very difficult to find. Very powerful must be your powers to have arrived here, by surprise, and achieved to expulse the demons. You have saved my life, and surely you have avoided me a terrible previous suffering. But, I don't know till what point give thanks to you, due to, as you will understand, I am tired to live. I comprehended it perfectly, due to, I was tired to live too. And, if I continued, as such Germanic Indian, would be exclusively for honor, because, was an honor to stay and comply with the mission that the gods that commanded the essential war had assigned, and because, after the final battle, once adjusted the accounts with the potencies of the matter, we would return definitively to the origin of the unquitted spirit. I saw the face of Segundo, decomposed with pain, and I ran to a contiguous warehouse to search the medical kit which was in the glove compartment of a pickup. With patience, I disinfected the 20 fingers, and I went bandaging them, one by one. I brought with me the sedative Tregees, and gave him 2 to swallow, 4 milligrams that would put him to sleep until the noon. Before concluding the cure, I was already nodding sleepy, so I took him to his room, making him to tread with the heels, and I left him lying in his humble carrot-tree bed. I heated coffee, and I drank it, more tranquil seated on a chair of the kitchen. The meeting with Segundo had calmed me a lot, and now I was meditating on the next steps to be followed. Over the table, I deposited the carafe of acid, transmuted as a very black liquid, but of light density. To recover the roses of stone, the earrings of VILLCA, I'd shed such useless substance into the pool, and I would neutralize the residual acidity with a powerful concentrated detergent that I discovered in a closet. 1 minute later, the earrings of Esther were in my pocket, already empty of weapons. Certainly, we exaggerated the artillery, and now they rested over the table, the attacker, 50 loaders, the 10 grenades of fragmentation, the bombs of Totil, and the mountain knife. With the body lighter, I assured with discretion of the profound dream of Segundo, and I decided to eliminate the rests of the ancient killers. Provided with a powerful lantern of 12 unities, I explored the surroundings of the ranch. I verified then, that, indeed, the edification of the house followed the charter of the ancient Pucara of Farsi, and that the perimeter fortress was reduced to a low round earth, of no more than a meter, to dissimulate its function, to shelter a liberated area. On its interior, still existed the ancient cromlech, which stones formed an enormous circle, in which area fitted the plant of the ranch. But, I was intrigued for the Manhur of Farsi, the one that the White Atlantans planted to establish the pact of blood with the lineage of Farsis, and determine their familiar mission. Taking the diameters of the cromlech, I searched on its intersection, the center, and I verified with intrigue that in such central site was falling in the interior of the ranch. At last, I had no doubts that the central site was located inside an enormous platform hermetically closed. I cut the chains and padlocks with inadequate tweezers, and I opened the doors of the platform. Incredibly, after centuries and millenniums, the Manhur of Farsi was still on its original place. Was of green stone, and showed on its base the millenary Apachfeta of Vulcan, Priwaka Voltingguananchan and Chanwangiri. Over the Apachfeta, the wise order the House of Farsis was for 443 years guarded as inhuman by indefatigable Noros and Reyes, descendants of Leto of Farsis. In front of such attitude of respect and trust in the loyal gods, assumed in millenniums of patient guard, what meant my actual anxieties, my selfish anguishes? The impressive Manhur, and its rustic altar of stone, had the virtue to ashamed me, from myself, of my human weakness, and to strengthen my will, to continue till the end. Considering all the vain and cruel efforts realized in the past by the demons Beret and Bishwa, it is not strange, the hate that would awaken them such ranch, in which they lived out from the range of the members of the House of Farsis, conserving the stone of Venus of the wise sword. But, they arrived late, they always arrived late to America. They didn't achieve to exterminate the lineage of Skeol, with the Hebrew Digwids, neither with the Spaniards of Diego of Almagro, of Diego of Rojas, and many others, nor the murder of BELICENA VILLCA served him at all, because she misled them wisely, nor the extermination of the von Subemans, permitted to end with Uncle Kurt. America had resulted them fatal. They didn't know where was Noyo VILLCA, with the wise sword, and they wanted to take revenge with the Indian Segundo, sacrifice him by means of horrible torture, before leaving from the unpredictable world of the House of Farsis. And they had been attacked, and dead when they least expected it. As a boomerang, their own hits returned against them. As in a hit of jujutsu, their enemies took advantage from their own movements, and returned their forces against them. In the warehouse that guarded the pickup existed every kind of tools. I went there, and took a white shovel, and I started to search for the adequate place to excavate the sepulchres. At 50 meters from the house, grew a bushy reed bed of guavas, which seemed to me that would be ideal place. It would cost to penetrate the coat of roots, but after some days no one could discover the minor trace of the removal. I returned 2 times to the house, and I charged the damn corpses in a wheelbarrow to facilitate the transport. In the last journey, I also brought a machete to open the dive. I looked at the clock of the house, and I verified that it signalized the 3 a.m. hours of the day April 23rd. The mine, instead, exhibited the 1:30 hours of April 26th. Logically, I synchronized my watch with local quadrant. Thus, at the 6 hours, 3 hours later, I finished the macabre task, to sepulture the destroyed corpses of the ancient killers. It was dawning, and I felt exhausted, psychic and physically exhausted. And many were still missing, ineludible issues, that admitted none dilation. One of them was to consummate the destruction of the black car of the killers, with the purpose to avoid the police tracking. But, for it, I needed to count with the help of Segundo. I drank a new cup of coffee, and then, I dedicated myself to throw soapy buckets of water in the garden, to eliminate the traces of blood, caution of more than avoid the police investigations, aimed to frustrate the even more terrible action of the Tucuman flies. With the light of the day, I discovered beside a tree, at 15 steps of distance from the door of the house, the jacket, and all the weapons of Uncle Kurt. Evidently, he had abandoned them before leaving, when he called the Docs Davis silently. In that moment, I thought that my will would break again. But, I recovered and united those objects with the rest of my equipment. I could not continue dressed as command, especially, if I would have to go out from the ranch, so, I dedicated myself to realize a prolix investigation of the interior of the house. I discarded the clothes of the Indian, for his appreciably minor size, and, I trusted in that Noiro VILLCA would have more contexture and would preserve his clothes. Finally, I encountered his room. After passing through the deceased BELICENA, I found, in fact, an assorted closet. I found a cowboy pant, more or less of my size, and a similar shirt. I decided to stay with the boots of my Dane, and, I made 2 huge packets with the weapons, and combat clothings. I just left the 4 bombs of Totil, without envelope. In box of shoes, of the vilest felt paper, I deposited the disastrous orgy, the scepter of power that, Regentiapo, gave to the demons Bore and Bishwa, jointly to the Pemas of stone, the earrings Esther of Avalokiteshvara. And then, when I concluded those minor tasks, I went to the black car to calm the comprehensible curiosity that the same awakened since the moment in which I knew its existence. Seen from far away, there were no doubts that it was about a classical North American limousine. But, at inspect closer, emerged the confusion for not being able to establish the model, nor the brand, as the policeman of Salta confirmed, because it had brand, and very visible, evident. But, who knew that brand? To which country it belonged? Immediately, assaulted me, the suspicion that the car was not from this world, that it came from a parallel reality to ours, where the gentlemen, as Bore and Bishwa, moved in cars eviant. Anyhow, was it really a car? Yes, it was. An authentic and excellent luxury car, apparently recently fresh off the fabric. I raised the hood, and observed a powerful engine of 8 cylinders in V. The keys were put. I started it, and I worked without problems. It was useless to check the interior, because the demons didn't have anything with them, neither documents, nor equipment. Nothing. What indicated that it didn't enter in their plans the possibility to be stopped, or interrogated in the paths, or that it didn't circulate in none manner through the path and routes of human civilization. At the 8:30 hours, I leaned on an armchair of the dinner room, and slept for a without frights, till the 13:30 hours. He was admired to know that I worked all the night, and that there were no traces left of the assassin's death. While I was drinking a coffee, I checked the wounds. I was especially interested on their feet, were very swollen. "Do you think that you'll be able to drive the pickup?" I asked. "I will do all the necessary," said bravely. "It doesn't matter the pain." "It will be at night," I explained him. "You'll have to drive some 15 or 20 kilometers to get rid of the car of the killers. But, before I will bring you meds and sedatives, just tell me, where is the nearest pharmacy? It was in Vale, at 5 kilometers of distance. At the 15 hours, after roasting a chicken, and eat it together, we went to the pharmacy in the pickup, and I bought the anti-tetanus vaccine, syringes, anti-inflammatories, and sedatives. At the 19 hours, we went out from the ranch. Segundo would go ahead, in the pickup, and I would follow him, in the Aviant. We would take through secondary roads, normally trackless. Due to the success of the maneuver, would depend that the black car be not seen by anyone, no one that could announce it to the police, and even less, the police, because would have its description. But everything went well. Segundo, with the bandaged fingers, and barefoot, because he could only wear one espadrille, was driving with skillfully towards the mountain range of Aconcagua. We crossed the river Vale, the White River, and we entered in a path, almost trackless, that ascended up to the peak of the hill La Evjera. I had to do crosses, with the enormous limousine to turn through the sharp bends of the path of Cornice. Finally, a few kilometers before the peak, we encountered the ideal place. The edge of an abyss of 1,000 meters, or more of profundity. There, I parked the black car, while Segundo moved backwards many meters. The pathway was so narrow, that we would have to move hundreds of meters backwards, until find an extension that would allow us to bend. The return of Segundo was necessary to prevent a possible collapse of the path, which would leave the pickup isolated and helpless to descend from the hill. Because I was planning to dynamite the Aviant, and that was very probable to occur, as it really occurred. I shared the content of a jerry can of 10 liters of gasoline inside the car. I programmed the electric detonators, with a time of 5 minutes, and I put a bomb upon the block of the engine, another in the interior of the cabin, another in the trunk, and another beneath the chassis. Thereupon, I closed the bonnet, the doors and the trunk, and I ran towards the pickup, which was waiting for me, 100 meters behind. The explosion of the 4 kilograms of totil was amazing on those mountains. Generators of prolonged echoes. The car would be never found, because only remained the disseminated rests on hundreds of meters of inaccessible precipice. When the explosion ceased, we approached a little, and reassured that it would happen in that way, because where I parked the car, the path had disappeared and the avalanche of stones had dragged the rest of the greatest till the bottom of the throat, burying them forever. I stayed 10 days in the ranch of BELICENA VILLCA, during which I talked a lot with Segundo, and we agreed about the future steps. I referred to him the last parts of the letter of BELICENA VILLCA, and I explained him that I had some indications about the possible residence of Nuevo VILLCA. All consisted to localize the mysterious order of Terodal Knights, and its pontiff, Nimrod, of Rosario. Due to a chapter had been closed in my life, and there would be no turning back, it just remained to continue with the adventure, and initiate the quest of the order in the province of Córdoba. Segundo manifested himself decided to accompany me in that mission. A part of being a Hyperborean initiate to disciple of BELICENA VILLCA, and possess a logic spiritual interest in the matter, the Indian, who reckoned 50 years old, knew Nuevo VILLCA since was a child, and he would do all possible to see him again, or help him. Thus, we designed a simple plan destined to resolve the last missing problems to move ourselves finally to Córdoba. In the ranch existed a fortune in Inca gold that BELICENA VILLCA mentioned on her letter. Segundo showed me the secret hideout nearby the manhur, where 250 kilograms of gold ingots were sighted. Originally, the Indian explained me, the gold constituted the crockery of the Princesquia, because the Incas didn't give any monetary value to such metal. Once in Tucumán, and to prevent possible surprises, the offspring of Leto of Tarsus melted all the utensils in the 17th century, and occulted the ingots where they still were. The family never had the necessity of such reserve, but we could take whatever we wanted, because such was the will of BELICENA VILLCA. However, As far as I know, such wealth belonged to no of Tharsis, and it was not convenient to touch it, for the moment. It resulted paramount, to assure the care of the ranch, even if we were absent for a long time. Segundo was occupied of it, bringing from Tafudel Vale, a nourished king that, on another occasions, had already cohabited in that place. They would live in the home service, and would watch the place. Once arranged this, we left on May 4th, towards Santa Maria, in the pickup of Segundo. I never thought to come back to Saltac, but I had to cancel that business of Uncle Kurt indefectibly. Apart that in the ranch of my uncle, were waiting for me the two most loved things, that were left for me in my life. The manuscript of BELICENA VILLCA, reproduced in this book, and the manuscript of Conrad Tarstein, of his unpublished book, The Secret History of the Gesellschaft, that I wish to publish in the future. The ranch of Santa Maria was impossible to sell, because Uncle Kurt was not dead, but disappeared, and his testimony of my favor lacked of value in this case. But, if I could rent it, and that was what I did, agreeing a contract with the Tolodes, who for many years accompanied my Uncle Kurt, they would be in charge of the small candy factory, and to guard the belongings of my uncle. They would just pay a moderate annual rent. Of course, that, in future, if I would need to reduce that property to spot money, I would appeal to the known expedient to falsify the death certificate of Sereno Sanguedels, and I would make valid the testament. But the future is still in hands of the gods. What I was able to sell was the ranch of Cirillos, which I not wanted to conserve anymore. I wrote, thus, to my lawyers of Saltac to put it in sale immediately, and liquidate it as soon as possible. 6 months later, in Cordoba, I signed the definitive documents of the transaction, and I received an appreciable sum of money. And the last day that I was in Santa Maria, I sent per parcel that 2 packs to my Dane, communicating him, in a brief note that the command operation resulted a success, and that would be worthless to search the Asian killers anymore. And that, not recovered from the pain of the death of my family, I undertook a rest journey, and at the return, I would gather with him. A white lie, it is clear. What else I could say to my Dane? Perhaps, in the future. Perhaps if the gods decide in the future,